Welcome back to the Hill of Roses, where we come once again to celebrate the best united progressive contributors to our overall movement. We have a treat today. We're doing our second part to the candidate supporter debate. Many of you who have been watching this channel for a bit have probably seen that debate where we had Scott Santens on, we had Stephanie Quailo on, as well as Nico House. Today we're following up with a group of high schoolers here between the ages of 16 and 17 because we wanted to test out the theory that all three of these candidates really support, which is they believe that we should be expanding our voting ages to 16. And so what better way to do that than say the people who would have been able to vote in this election had the rules been at 16, than having a debate to see what people of that age group know and why they've grown to be such fans of these candidates in general. So with us today, we have Alex, who is going to be representing Bernie Sanders today. Alex, do you want to let the folks out there know where you're from, as well as why you came to really support Bernie Sanders as your top choice?
Yeah, for sure. My name is Alex Kawa. I'm 17 years old and I live in Connecticut. I supported Bernie. Well, I've been interested in politics for a really long time. I started becoming more politically active in my high school years. In my high school days, all 2015, when I had to do an assignment for Boy Scouts where I had to write to. I wrote to one of my senators about student loans, and then my mom told me about how an education plan, how he wanted to make college tuition free. And from that moment on, I was hooked on him, and I watched him during the debates against Hillary Clinton. I thought he did phenomenal, and I loved him. And ever since then, I've been supporting our revolution. I've been supporting the movement that he created, and we've made incredible progress so far, and I don't want to stop now.
Yeah, I can certainly hear you. I think a lot of the people who are supportive of Bernie now were also supportive of him in 2016. So it's great to see, even at a younger age, that you were a fan of his and that it's kept growing.
Yeah, I was like 13. So I mean, just the fact that he even engaged me at that, he really exposed me to the problems in our political system.
Yeah, no, I certainly can understand that. Our next guest that we have today is Nolan. Nolan's going to be representing Tulsi Gabbard today. Nolan, want to let the folks out there know where you're from, as well as what came to be the reason you joined Tulsi Gabbard as a supporter.
Yeah, so my name's Nolan Smith. I'm from Bel Air, Maryland. I'm 15 years old right now, but I will be 16 come Maryland's Democratic primary and the 2020 general election. And I became a supporter of Tulsi the day after she announced on Van Jones' show on CNN. I began to look into the policies that she supported. I began to look into her background, and I said, you know what, this is the candidate that we need for the future. She has a foreign policy that is about peace and diplomacy and not about war and about fomenting this new Cold War and nuclear arms race. She wants to end that, which I think is a very moving message and something that we need to really do in our own country. Come early March of 2019, I decided to create Students for Tulsi, which is now a campaign affiliate organization of high school and college students who works to organize volunteers to support Tulsi across the whole country. I originally created the organization as an Instagram account, and it's just grown exponentially ever since. It's really been incredible to see our growth and the amount of people who are interested in supporting us, and it's just been really moving too. But actually, back in 2016, when I was 11 years old, I supported Hillary Clinton in both the primary and the general election. And my parents, I'm not influenced by their political views. I'm very much of an independent thinker. My mom is pretty politically apathetic, while my dad is more center-right. So I've been able to form my own opinions over time. And so I supported Hillary back then. If I went back, I would support Bernie Sanders. But now I've changed and I've become progressive. I've gone through this long ideological shift to where I am now. And so that ultimately motivated me to support Tulsi Gabbard.
Okay, that's a very interesting background, especially with the conflicts that those two specific candidates, Hillary as well as Tulsi, are now having now.
Yeah.
And I got to give, again, credit for organizing as you did at such a young age and getting engaged in the national process. Blake, how about you? Where are you from? I know today you're here to represent Andrew Yang. So what led you also to be able to join his movement in 2020?
Yeah, so starting from the top, Andrew Yang was relatively unknown. I mean, he was at 0% for a long, long time in the polls. I first came across him just looking over the Wikipedia page of declared candidates at that point, and I saw Andrew Yang, and it was like he worked for Venture for America. He had a business career. He seemed like he did some good work. I looked into him, and I almost saw the Freedom Dividend as, somewhat of a joke at first, something that seems so unrealistic. Yet when you look into it, I watched him on the Joe Rogan show, and I watched him on Ben Shapiro's podcast. So it was really interesting just to watch him on all these different areas. And when you see his reasons for this, math reports, and what he lays out, it's really smart plans he's laying out, and he's really running on reason and facts. And that's really how I became a supporter of Andrew Yang. Now, I think back in 2016, I wasn't as politically active as I was today. I probably would have lied in the Hillary Clinton camp more of than the Bernie Sanders camp. However, now I really have gotten behind Andrew Yang, so I'm not really with either of them. I'm trying to think about independently thinking, just like Andrew Yang has as well. I mean, he's not running on party ideas. He's really coming as an outsider, and he's running on solutions to everyday problems. So right now I'm working on Twitter with the campaign a bit. I'm a volunteer as well, and I run the Jews for Yang Twitter account. We have close to 3,000 followers, so we're doing pretty good in that area as well.
Well, we're very happy to have you on, Blake, and I have to say I discovered Andrew Yang myself from Wikipedia pages of declared candidates, so we have that in common of how we figured out Andrew Yang was in this race. I think the most important question that we really got to start this debate off with, and I'll get into the rules after I answer what the topic is really, should we be able to have people of your age group able to vote? So when we're having our debate today, as we kind of were doing similarly in the first candidate supporter debate, but now we've tried to condense things, as that was truly a marathon level of an episode at 4 hours, so we're going to try and keep things a little shorter today. We're going to be asking all of our participants here today to please refrain from interrupting each other, as they've done so well so far. We're going to be having them make a closing remark at the end, again, kind of surmising what they've already told us on why they support these candidates.
I'll be right back in a second.
And then we're also going to be asking them to try to keep it concise. We know people get very enthusiastic, and therefore they're going to speak for a while. But we tell people to try and aim for 45 seconds so that when they go long, it's not too long. So each question is also going to have 2 rounds of response. So I'm going to ask you each for your initial opinion, and then I'll give you a chance to respond to each other. Does that make sense to you all?
Yes.
Okay, great. So as I mentioned before, the first question is really, should we be lowering the voting age to 16? So I'm going to start first with Nolan on this one. Nolan, what do you think? Should we be expanding the voting age to 16?
Yes, I totally believe that we should be lowering the voting age to 16 as well as Tulsi does, as she voted for Ayanna Pressley's amendment to H.R. 1, the For the People Act, in the beginning of this year to lower the voting age to 16. And I think it's really important, and I really don't like the stereotype of, oh, young people aren't engaged or they don't know what they're talking about, because we are truly independent thinkers. We can think for ourselves, we can seek out the information to base our opinions off of, and if we lower the voting age to 16, that will not only help people and give people really a good national platform to be able to express their political ideologies and really vote for the candidates they're passionate about, but also motivate people who necessarily aren't politically engaged to finally get involved, as I believe that if young people do have that opportunity to vote, they will want to learn and they will want to grow in their political beliefs. And I think if you look at groups like March for Our Lives, which I'm a part of, Sunrise Movement, and many others that really assist young people in a platform of certain political issues, these people are incredibly intelligent. They know what they're talking about. And even though they're not 18 yet, they still should be able to vote. But that ultimately is where my opinion is. Yes, I do think that we should lower the voting age to 16.
Okay, Blake, what do you think? Should we expand the voting age to 16?
Well, it's quite an interesting question. I mean, for a while we were looking at this Gen Z generation, which is what we are all in, what the 16, 17-year-olds would be voting where it would be in. And we saw people, what were they doing? Eating Tide Pods, going out into stores and licking ice cream. And you say, is this really a generation and people of this age that should be able to vote? But when you look into it and you see this rise, as Nolan talked about, in youth speaking up and really standing up, it makes a lot of sense, actually. So Right now, high schoolers, there's not too many of them who are politically active, especially when compared to college. I mean, when you see high schoolers, per se, maybe the ones who can vote are the seniors who are about to leave, some of the older side. So they're not, high schools themselves are not politically active as we really can make them. And if we can get 16, 17-year-olds to vote, I think that really grow the discourse between high schools and people speaking among that. And I know a lot of people would like to make the claim that high schoolers are naive or may not know what they're really talking about. But at the same time, we're not making Americans who are over the age of 18 take a history test or a citizenship test with going to the polls. So 16-year-olds themselves, they can find that information. They can hear from candidates themselves just as well, if not better, than adults necessarily. And at the same time, something I really want to talk about is 16-year-olds who work, 17-year-olds who work and pay taxes. Right now, I have a portfolio of stocks. I'm paying capital gains tax upon that, yet I cannot vote. So something that is the founding principle of this country is no taxation without representation. If 16, 17-year-olds are working and paying taxes, absolutely they should vote. And the last thing I just want to talk about is that younger voters, when they start voting younger, they will turn out and vote more in the future. The younger voters start, the greater chances they will vote in the future, and that is just backed up by statistics very well throughout the world. So yeah.
Okay, so we have two right now that are in support of expanding the voting age. Alex, do you echo both of their opinions so far on that topic?
Yes. I might as well just not say anything because I think they've said everything that needs to be said, honestly. I mean, it's true. Young people have been politically active. They've gotten extremely politically active lately, which is fantastic. They've been fighting for progressive policies on gun reform, the environment, and it's just incredible to see this stuff. Last week, I was doing, on election day last week, I was phone for my municipal elections, and my sister's friend was at there. She was with her mom, who's active in our local Democratic town committee. She's 12 years old, and she was making calls, and that just really brought a smile to my face because I'm seeing this young person getting so politically active at such a young age, and just that is really incredible to see. And you guys are absolutely right. We're politically active. Several pay taxes. And it has been proven that starting voting at a younger age will lead to better voting habits in the future. Not just that, but it teaches the importance of civic engagement to young people in America.
Yeah, so I think since this is not a topic where there's a lot of disagreement, but I wanted to kind of go around and hear how you guys feel about the age of 16. You mentioned that you had a 12-year-old getting civically engaged. So if we start lowering the voting age to 16, do you think that's the appropriate age? Should it be any lower?
I think yes. I think look, I'm glad that she's involved at such a young age, but I would honestly say 16 should be a limit. I gotta say.
Okay, Nolan, would you agree with that?
I can get behind 16.
Yeah, I do agree with that. And I look at it from the perspective at 16, you're getting your license, you're probably working your first job, you're going to be paying taxes on your check. And so ultimately, I think that if you have a driver's license, if you pay a job, if you're an active person in our community, you should be able to vote because tax policy and things like that and our road laws, they affect you every day. So you should be able to have a say in the politicians that will affect your life every single day. But I don't think that we should bring it any lower to 16.
Okay. How about you, Blake? Do you agree that 16 is that limit?
Well, I think the age of 15 and 16, there's somewhat of a difference. I mean, I think there's a pretty big difference. But I think between those ages, I think that there's a maturity level that you reach at that time. However, I think that it should really be up to the state governments to almost decide that at that point, not necessarily the federal government. I think the 16 age should be set, but I think that it should really be up to the states and municipalities as well.
Okay, so I think that's the most amount of agreement that we're going to likely have during this conversation. I think we all are here because we want to show that people of your age ranges are going to be able to vote. But I think one of the next topics that we really got to talk about, and is especially important with the younger generation, is really talking about the environment. As young people, we are going to be the people left behind with potentially an uninhabitable environment the longest. We are going to be the people who actually have to deal with the impacts potentially further down the road, as well as today as well. So I think one of the big things that has been talked about in how we get off of fossil fuels is the subject of nuclear energy. And this is where there is some divide between the candidates on its use as an energy source to say, should we embrace it or not? So I want to start first with Blake. Blake, Andrew Yang has been supportive of nuclear energy. Why do you think it's something that we need to embrace as an energy source?
Well, it really is something we should embrace, and Andrew Yang is right in being one of the few candidates to actually do so. So when we start off, we look at this, we are facing an existential threat in climate change, and we really need solutions that are outside the box to solve it, because the path we have gone on for the past 30-some years to fix a well-known problem has not done anything. So to solve this issue, Andrew Yang has proposed nuclear energy as a form of energy to replace carbon. So it would not be the end-all be-all solution, but it would serve as somewhat of a nuclear source while we transition to a potentially very high-powered, majority-powered green energy, clean energy, fully clean energy with like sunlight. But nuclear energy is a clean source of energy, and it is really the only source we have today that is really making a big impact in regards to being carbon-free, but also providing a lot of energy. So it provides 20% of our energy today, and it does not release any carbon. So it's really important in that regard. And the NEA, the Nuclear Energy Agency, has actually said that fewer deaths will come as a result of nuclear energy by far than fossil fuels. So something Andrew Yang has proposed that's very interesting is using thorium reactors instead of uranium reactors. So after the Manhattan Project in the 1940s, they were thinking about thorium reactors rather than uranium. They went with uranium. However, thorium, when you look into it and the history behind it, it's really a power source that's very interesting. Not only is it plentiful, but it's also less radioactive over a longer period of time. And thorium, the thorium, the fears of it are not there necessarily like uranium with nuclear weapons.
Okay. So I think we have two people here that have candidates that are now against it. I think the first person I'd like to hear from is Nolan. What's your opinion when it comes to nuclear energy? Are you with Tulsi Gabbard in being opposed to it?
I am. I think that we need to focus more on renewables such as wind, solar, and geothermal. These are all in her bill, the OFF Act, the Off Fossil Fuels Act. This transitions our country 100% off of fossil fuels and puts a ban on fracking, and it will transition us 100% off of fossil fuels by 2035. It has been endorsed by over 400 organizations, as Nico House said in the previous debate, including the Democratic Socialists of America and Our Revolution. So it has Bernie support as well. But I think that needs to be the focus, is on renewables such as wind, solar, and geothermal. And we also, the ban on fracking is important, and I think it has been proven, and we know that these are the most eco-friendly of energy sources that we can utilize in our country, and I think that that's most important. And we also need to focus on ending the $25 billion we give away in subsidies to fossil fuel companies. That is a big problem, as our politicians are essentially in bed with the fossil fuel industry, and that needs to go. People like Joe Manchin, Democrats like Joe Manchin, they need to go. They need to be voted out. So I think it's a central issue, and I don't think that we can focus it on just nuclear energy. It needs to be that broader topic of renewables, such as wind, solar, and geothermal.
Okay. How about you, Alex? Are you in favor of using nuclear energy? I know Bernie Sanders is a person who does not necessarily support nuclear energy. Are you along with Tulsi Gabbard and Bernie Sanders on that topic?
Yes, I am, and I agree with Nolan. I think Nolan is absolutely right. The Off Act was a great bill, and I'm glad that Tulsi took the initiative on that, and I'm glad that she spearheaded that, because that was a great bill, and it really laid out a comprehensive plan for our future. Now, there are several dangers with nuclear energy. I mean, first of all, it costs around like 2 to 7 times that of like a wind farm onshore, and the LCOE, the levelized cost of energy, that estimates the cost. It doesn't even include the cost of distinctly possible nuclear meltdowns, and there have been several safety measures implemented at nuclear plants, but none of them have been properly not many of them have been properly tested. And so nuclear waste disposal could result in radioactive leaks that could completely damage everyone involved. And not to mention when China didn't experiment with nuclear energy, their emissions actually increased by 1.3%. And according to the IPCC, which is the one that says we have until 2030 to curb the climate crisis, they say that there is robust evidence and high agreement that nuclear weapons proliferation could become an issue due to an expansion of nuclear energy. So these are some of the concerns with nuclear energy, not to mention the fact that solar, wind, geothermal, as Nolan said, these are true green solutions that are truly going to weather our climate crisis and take the bold action that we desperately need.
Okay. So, Blake, I know before you agreed with them on some of the other measures that we need to do to ingest our environmental crisis. But why do you think nuclear has a place within the portfolio of energy that we need to produce to get off of fossil fuels?
Yeah. So I saw Alex talked about a lot of criticisms of nuclear energy. One thing I just want to say is you mentioned the price. So yes, nuclear energy is one of the more expensive types of energy, but no, it's a lot more expensive spending hundreds of trillions of dollars on fixing climate change when we have a solution that's clean right in front of us and is working right now. So I just want to point that out. And obviously, Andrew Yang, the campaign, is not against green forms of energy like solar, wind, geothermal. Obviously, he's for that. However, we need to find a way to leave fossil fuels and to get to green energy with something in our something. We need a path to get there, and the way to do that is with nuclear energy. So nuclear energy does not, as I said before, does not release any carbon emissions, and it is one of the cleanest form of energy. So we look at France and Sweden. They have some of the lowest carbon emission rates in the world because they are 80 to 90% carbon free, and they use nuclear power plants to power most of the country. Germany, on the other hand, they eliminated most of the nuclear power plants. What went up? Coal use, and what went up? Carbon emissions. So that's really the problem with not using nuclear energy. If we're going to ban nuclear energy, what will happen? More emissions from carbon, and that's a real issue we have. And one other thing I want to point out is if we are to transition to wind and solar, we need to also point out that those are not perfect as well. What if the wind is not blowing one day? What if the sun is not shining? We need to also access other sources of energy as well. And winds, there's major problems with the fields and birds running into them. Not to say that they're not a good form of energy. Obviously, they're clean, but there's just negatives to them as well. And the last thing is these sites really are going through a lot of testing. The federal government has standards on them. More people have actually died falling off roofs installing solar power panels than actually from nuclear disasters. So I think Chernobyl and shows like that have obviously made nuclear energy taboo or somewhat scary. But when you look into it and what Andrew Yang has proposed and the science behind it, it's not as scary as it seems. And it's really an important thing we need to do to get to a 100% renewable economy. But we need something to help us along the way, and that is nuclear energy.
Okay. Nolan, how would you want to respond to Blake? Beforehand, we didn't necessarily hear a ton on nuclear, but more about the off act itself.
Yeah, so I disagree with the point on that. If the wind's not blowing, we won't have electricity, or if the sun's not shining, we won't have the electricity, because that's not really how it works. What it does is it collects that energy throughout the day and it stores it so that you have it. And it's always going to be constant. Even when there's clouds in the sky, you're still going to get that energy from the sun, and it's going to go into the panels, and you're going to have that energy stored to be able to use. Same goes with the wind. Even the slightest wind movements, you're still going to get energy from that. And another point I wanted to make is the negative effects, such as people falling off and getting fatal injuries or sometimes dying from installing solar panels. That's not really a big issue. We can just have professionals install them. And the thing with the windmills and the birds, I feel like birds they can a lot of times get out of the way. So I don't think that will be a major concern of ours going forward. But yeah.
I just wanted to say that I wasn't talking about solar panels necessarily being a danger to install. I'm just saying that nuclear energy, less people have died from that than people installing solar panels on roofs. That's all I was saying. I'm not saying it's a dangerous form of energy by any means.
Oh yeah, I know, I got you. But the thing I have with nuclear energy is that it can be catastrophic. It's about the scale of it, because as we know, just going back to foreign policy as well, and the risk of nuclear war, it can wipe out the entire planet at this point. So I think that's also a major concern.
Okay. Alex, do you have something you wanted to add in on what Blake had brought up on being pro-nuclear energy?
Yeah, sure. Look, Blake, first of all, I wasn't accusing your candidate of being anti-solar, anti-wind. I wasn't accusing him of any of that. I was just saying that nuclear, I don't believe, is the way to go, because you mentioned, look, at the end of the day, the three of us all share the same goal to get off fossil fuels. Now, anyway, I think that if all of us share that goal, then and that's good. But I think that if we're going at it, we need to look at what is the best way to go as carbon neutral as possibly to go net zero, and and you know, um, I think that if we really want to see this opportunity, we have to invest. I mean, Bernie's calling for a multi-trillion-dollar investment in these energy forms, these renewable energy forms. And this is the kind of opportunity we can't pass up because I think it's the most comprehensive climate plan. If I'm being distracted, I apologize. My sister is being really distracting right now, so I apologize for my disorganization because she distracted me and that kind of threw me off. So I apologize if I come across as unorganized.
It's
But
it's okay. We have more of an audience now than just the people online. We now have it in person as well, so
yeah,
that
but
we
I
can
think
certainly understand for the debates.
so basically, too long didn't read. I think that I think what Nolan's saying is right. Wind and solar are definitely they. I think that they're absolutely renewable and they're growing at a fast rate. Their popularity is growing and so they're being used more across the country. So we have a real chance now to see this opportunity. I think that it's a much better choice than nuclear. It's much more sustainable, much more renewable, and I think it's the best way to go. I would have to say.
Okay, so now I think the next topic that we also have to bring up when we're talking to a young audience is also the idea of college. You're all people aging towards the nearing of college, either seniors, juniors, sophomores, somewhere in between that range, and college is on the horizon. One of the proposals that's been proposed by Bernie Sanders, at least as a champion of it, is free public college. And so I wanted to hear from all three of you, are you in favor of making college tuition free? So I'll start first with Alex again. Bernie is a champion of this. Do you support Bernie on that issue?
Absolutely. And you heard me say it at the beginning. I am one of the reasons that I was drawn to him in the first place was his education plans because that was something that I had expressed concern after doing some research on the burden of student loan debt. And when my mom informed me of what he wanted to do with making college tuition free, that was what first drew me into his campaign. So I obviously agree with him on that because that was the reason I began supporting his campaign in the first place. And with his plan, when you think about what his entire plan is, making college tuition free, canceling all existing student loan debt, and this would cost $2.2 trillion a decade. And what it would do is would guarantee college as a basic human right by making public colleges and universities tuition free. It would cancel all existing student loan debt. It would fund states, tribes, and historically black colleges and universities which would eliminate undergraduate tuition fees. And this would all be paid for by a transaction tax on stocks, bonds, etc., sold at Wall Street. And according to Robert Pollin, who is an economist, this would raise $2.4 trillion a decade. So this plan would actually raise hundreds of billions of dollars more than what it would cost. So you just can't go wrong with that, I see. And so I absolutely support Bernie's plan, 100%.
Okay, Blake, how do you feel about public college being tuition free?
So one thing I want to bring up first is education as a whole, and 75% of the academic performance of students is not controlled by teachers, and that's something that's really wrong with our society as a whole. We send students to college right now expecting professors to fix them. We expect their high school teachers to fix them, but they can only control 25% of the students. So that's just something I want to point out, and that's where the freedom dividend will come in. We'll get to that later. But I want to talk about college. Right now, yes, it is too expensive. Harvard University, 1990, about 30 years ago, it was 13,000 bucks. Today, it's about 50,000 bucks. That's a huge increase, 400% almost. But the thing we need to realize is, yes, college is too expensive. But the problem is, I know, Alex, you said college is a right. But right now, we are sending a lot of people to college. And necessarily, maybe that's not the right thing. Only 33% of Americans actually have college degrees. That number does go up when you look at trade schools and community colleges. However, 44% of college graduates today are underemployed. That is a major problem. We are sending our kids to universities them to get jobs, yet they are still underemployed. So a problem with our country today is we're not investing enough in our future. We need to invest in vocational schools and trade schools. That's a lot more important for a lot of people because we are making college to be this end-all be-all thing when it's not for a lot of people. In Germany, 50% of students are taught technological stuff in technological trades in high school. In America, that's about 6%. That's far too low, far too low. We need to invest in that because instead of saying we should just send our kids to college, that'll make their future, we should really say that college is not for everybody. It really isn't because college just is not going to prepare people for the jobs they need in the modern world, especially with a changing economy, with automation as well.
Okay. Nolan, how about you? How do you feel about having public colleges become tuition free?
I am completely for it. And I think this is one of the most important issues facing young people behind gun reform and climate change. Tulsi is a co-sponsor of the College for All Act in the House. She is a proponent of this. She is a proponent for debt forgiveness. And I agree with you. College should not be the end-all be-all. Whether somebody wants to go into the military, whether they want to go in the workforce, that needs the burden of not going to college needs to be removed. And I think that's incredibly important. Another thing I want to focus on is our current public school system, K through 12, needs to have a significant amount of reform. And I feel like the presidential candidates, our candidates respectively as well, don't talk about this virtually at all. I think that we need to focus more on and put more funding towards the arts, athletics, engineering. I think that we need to add languages such as Italian, Mandarin, and Latin to colleges, to high schools that don't have them currently. And I also think that not colleges should be public tuition free. So that's my general position on it. The way we go about that is a different story, but I do think, speaking generally, the burden of not going to college needs to be removed. The public education system needs to be reformed, and the College for All Act and debt forgiveness needs to be passed, so we can give people that stability who want to get that college degree to be able to do so.
Okay. So, Alex, do you want to add on why you also are a proponent of the College for All Act?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you, Nolan, for bringing up public schools, because I do agree that that is something that is fairly under-discussed. If that's not a word, it is now. But I mean, I'm fortunate enough to live in Connecticut, which has some of the best public schools in America. So, I mean, I guess it's something I guess you could possibly say take for granted. But I just want to give you credit on that. But going to your a lot of people don't go to college, but do you think do you think one of the reasons for that is because they can't afford it? I mean, I think that's a really big reason why a lot of students don't go to college. And when you say about college not being the end all be all, yeah, you're right. It's not. Like, you went to college, that doesn't automatically mean your life is set, but a vast majority of jobs nowadays do require at least some college degree. And so it's definitely going to be a major benefit to you in the future. And when you say that the economy is ever changing, yes, it absolutely is. But I think we'll get more into this when we talk about the federal jobs guarantee versus universal basic income, I'm sure. But I just wanted to say that for now, when a vast majority of jobs require at least some college may not be the end all be all, it is absolutely a necessary step to take. And we need to make sure that everybody can go to college regardless of their financial state, because that is basically criminalizing poverty, and we cannot have that.
Okay, so Blake, I know you said it's not the end-all be-all and that we need to be prioritizing more vocational and trade schools, but would you be for the College for All Act?
No, because right now we need to invest in other opportunities than just college, and free college will not just solve that. Most Americans do not go to college. We need to invest in all Americans and make vocational and trade schools a lot more available to the regular people, because only 33% of Americans attend college. Making the price go down, yes, but making it free, that's not going to fix the situation for a lot of Americans. Now, something I do want to talk about is is that Alex said that Americans aren't going to college right now because it's too expensive, but I have to say, I completely disagree. Right now, we're seeing Americans taking out hundreds of thousands of dollars in loans because there's such a stigma about having to attend college. Under a Yang administration, we are going to put people in the White House who may not have gone to college. who may have gone to vocational school and end the stigma that exists around those types of jobs. Yes, being a plumber is okay in this country, and that's something that Andrew Yang is going to destigmatize, which really exists today. Um, and I think when it comes to debt forgiveness, that's something that we absolutely should get behind. Is it expensive to forgive debt? Absolutely. But is it the right thing to do? Yes. And the more important thing is, or not more important, but just as important, is the economic value. Right now, people cannot get credit cards. They are strapped with debt. People cannot get their own houses. They are struggling with student loan debt, and it's leading to deaths of despair. People are getting addicted to drugs because of the expenses of these colleges, and the debt that has come as a result of that. So we should forgive student loan debt and allow students who were basically extorted into these terrible contracts to leave the debt that's holding them down. And I think they will have the economic ability to create new businesses and get a lot more done than that when they don't have this burden of stress as a result of debt.
Okay. Nolan, would you care to respond?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I'm glad that we all see eye to eye on the debt forgiveness part. However, we do disagree on the tuition-free college part. And you want to talk about giving people the opportunity to do what they want. And I think giving that free college option is giving people the opportunity of what they want. If they want to go into college and get a degree and get some sort of professional job, they should be able to do so. If they want to go in the military and become a service member and serve our country on the battlefield, they should be able to do so. If they want to go into the workforce, they should be able to do so. So I think that shutting out the free college option would actually restrict their opportunity. Debt would still pile up. So we forgive all that debt, and then we still make this generation pay for college, and then that debt's going to rise back up again, and at one point we're going to have to forgive it, and it's just going to be this never-ending cycle. So that's why I think that we need to have the full package of the College for All Act and make public college tuition free.
Okay. Alex, do you have any final thoughts on the subject of college education being free for public colleges and universities?
Sure. I stand by my position. I think, Blake, I think what you said about funding for vocational and trade schools, yes, for sure. I mean, my cousin goes to a trade school, so obviously I'm in the middle of something. I'm talking to my sister. My cousin goes to a trade school. He's worked really hard there. He does really well there. So obviously, not against that by any means. If people want to go to a trade school, well, they're still educating themselves for their future, and so I absolutely will support them in that. And I think that, yes, obviously, when you mentioned how people are basically tricked into getting student loans, and then that debt ties them down for the rest of their life. Yes, for sure it does. And that is one of the reasons why I'm supporting Bernie Sanders, because he's the only candidate who has pledged to forgive all student loan debt, because he is, I believe, the best one on this issue. And if you're talking about that kind of stuff, then it is important to understand, I think. Basically, to sum it up, I agree with what you said about trade and vocational schools. And I agree, and I'm glad that we can all agree. While we may have disagreements on making college tuition free, I'm glad that we can all agree on canceling student loan debt. And I'm glad we can all agree that trade and vocational schools should receive more funding.
Okay, so now I want to stick with you, Alex. As we had done in our previous candidate supporter debate, we had questions that came from the other supporters. So they had submitted both of their questions ahead of time, and so now I'm going to relay them both to you. So the first question is that we have some support from our Tulsi fan, Nolan here, on being supportive of Bernie Sanders being an organizer-in-chief if elected president. How do you think he actually goes about being an organizer-in-chief?
Oh, well, I think that's pretty easy. Look, Congress is never going to pass Medicare for All, Green New Deal, all these types of bills on their own. The only one of his proposals that I think would stand a chance at getting passed on their own is $15 minimum wage. We saw the House pass it this year with support from almost every Democrat, and even a handful of Republicans. So I think that the $15 minimum wage bill, maybe that's for everything else. Well, I think if he gets elected, that'll send a sign to the people in Washington. This is what you want to do, so we're going to vote you out if you don't, because that would show that most Americans are on his side on these issues. And he's talking about bringing a mass movement together to get these policies implemented. we need a movement like we had with the civil rights movement, with the women's suffrage movement, with the anti-slavery movement. When you see what happens with those movements, that's the kind of movement we need to get these policies implemented. And where Bernie comes into play, if there's any Democrats who's stepping out of line, you know what you got to do, President Sanders? Bring them into your office. Vote for Medicare for all. And if you don't, I'm going to come down to your home state and campaign for your primary opponent who will. I mean, that's how Trump got some of his Republican senators to vote for the Obamacare repeal. Now, little does he know that it doesn't matter how red your state is. No one likes getting their health insurance taken away from them. So, of course, some of them lost. But, I mean, well, at least one of them did. But that's besides the point. The point is that he was able to make sure that his party fell in line. And I think that's exactly what President Bernie Sanders needs to do. And he is the only one, as far as I'm concerned, and please correct me if I'm wrong, who has committed to doing that. And so that is why I think he would be the best organizer-in-chief.
Okay. And now the second question that you were posed by Blake here is kind of demonstrating that organizer-in-chief attitude. Senator Sanders has been in his role in politics for nearly 40 years now. What legislation has he accomplished in those 40 years that makes you believe he would be a good president?
Oh, well, he's he's known as the Amendment King because he's gotten several amendments passed that many of it has been for the better. I mean, you saw, and I wanted to save this for when we discuss foreign policy, but I think it's appropriate to bring up now. He helped get the bipartisan, and that's one of the rare times I actually use that in a good way, the bipartisan war powers resolution to end U.S. involvement in the Saudi-led genocide in Yemen. He got that passed through Congress. Now, of course, Saudi puppet Trump decided he was going to veto it, and this is saying a lot, but I think that's the worst thing he's done his entire presidency. But he also worked with Senator John McCain on a veterans compensation bill and he also spearheaded an amendment for Obamacare that expanded health and dental insurance to millions of Americans nationwide. And he's also helped shame Jeff Bezos into getting Amazon workers a living wage. He's also helped that for Disney workers. He's helped create change in and out of the Senate. And not to mention, he's also influenced public opinion on these policies. And that's why they're overwhelmingly popular today amongst Democrats, independents, and even several. And so he has a record of accomplishments. And that is why I believe he is someone who we can trust to get these policies implemented.
Okay, thank you for that. And so now I'm going to go back to a question that we can all answer now. We're going to turn to the subject of healthcare. You all are at the age now where college is your pressing concern. I, being someone who is 25, soon to be 26, healthcare insurance is a big thing on my mind. I'm going to not be on my parents' insurance anymore at the end of the year. So one of the slight areas of disagreement among the circles is whether or not, when we are supportive of universal health care, on whether or not we should implement a single-payer system of health care or a public option for it. So with this, I want to hear Nolan first. Nolan, how do you feel between those two systems? Should we be embracing a single-payer system or a public option?
We should be embracing a single-payer system. I support it along with Tulsi. She supports it despite some false reporting by people and some skewing of the actual facts. She's currently developing her healthcare plan called Single Payer Plus. It will be released soon, and so once it's released, people will be able to dissect it and get into the nitty-gritty details of the policy. But in a nutshell, what it means is that everybody would buy in or enroll in the federal national Medicare system. But if you have a union or an employee-sponsored insurance plan, you are free to keep it. However, it would not undermine the Medicare plan that you would get. It would just be supplemental insurance. Under her plan, she would also include for dental, vision, and hearing, and you would be able to choose your doctor and hospital. And so she's on the Medicare for All caucus. She's a co-sponsor of Jayapal's Medicare for All bill. And if she were to be president and Jayapal's bill were to come to her desk, she would sign it. So I think there's this false misconception that Tulsi backed away from Medicare for All when we just saw today Elizabeth Warren actually backed out from Medicare for All, as you may have seen on Twitter in some of the news headlines. She said, oh, it's just going to be a transition period. I'm going to fight for it in my third year. So it was a very it was a sleazy move by Warren, who I generally actually admire and like and respect as a candidate and a senator. But it was really disappointing to see that. that is an actual abandonment of Medicare for all. What Tulsi did is not. She's simply clarifying her stance and actually improving the current Medicare system.
Okay. Blake, how about you? Do you support a single payer system or do you support a public option?
So we first have to just lay out the facts of our current healthcare system. 44 million Americans are uninsured. That is a problem. Now,
Yeah, you could go again, Blake.
and that's a country spent twice as much on healthcare as the rest of the world. So those are really major problems we have. 18% of our GDP is being spent on healthcare. So we really need to address that we don't have a healthcare system, we have a sick care system. We're just slapping band-aids on people rather than fixing the problem. Now, on the Medicare for All versus the public option plan, I support the spirit of a Medicare for All program. However, if we want to implement a program similar to that, we cannot just drag the rugs off of people and lay them low. Almost 70% of Americans have private insurance. If you take them off that insurance, yes, there will be repercussions in that short period of time having to sign up for a Medicare system provided by the government. And yes, there will be problems in that short period of time for the millions of people who are employed by the healthcare industry. So what we need to do is not take away private insurance. We need to put in place a public option.
Okay. So, Alex, how do you feel on this subject? Are you a fan of single payer? Bernie Sanders wrote the bill. Do you support the single payer bill that he wrote?
Damn bill. He wrote the damn bill, and yes, I do absolutely 100% support it. I'll have those later. Yeah, I absolutely support it 100%, and this is the area. It's very hard to argue that he's not the strongest on. It's very hard to argue that, and because now look, Nolan. First, I want to say thank you for informing me about the thing about Warren. I had not heard about that. Of course, because I haven't had power most of the day, I haven't been able to check this stuff out, so I haven't checked it. But thank you for informing me on that. But look, with the problem, Blake, with the public option is this is something that I know a lot of people have pointed out before. If you have a public option and with private insurance, what the private insurers are going to do is going to kick what they would likely do, and this is, I mean, the healthcare system, the industry is completely corrupt, and so what they're probably going to do is they take all of the sick people off of their insurance and move them to the public plan, which would be underfunded because this is not a single payer system. This is a public option, and that would completely crowd that, and that would completely make it not nearly as good as it could be. And also, public option, proponents of public option like to use the choice argument. Well, that's a myth because you still are limited. You're still limited as a choice as to what your providers and doctors are. And not to mention, but Medicare for All is not only is it the morally correct thing to do by guaranteeing everyone healthcare as a basic human right, it is economically the right thing to do because according to a UMass Amherst study, it saves $5 trillion over the decade, and it supports income equality, and it supports job creation by lowering operating costs for small and medium-sized businesses. And so, I don't think you can go wrong with that. And also, you mentioned how we're just taking away private insurance. That is such. Look, I'm sorry, man, but that is just not. That is such a, for lack of a better term, sleazy way to put it, because these people will still be, it's comprehensive. It covers health, it covers dental, it covers vision, it'll cover all of your basic needs. And yes, you can still get supplemental private insurance if you want some like plastic surgery. But I mean, to say it'll take from you, I mean, that is just not true when you know what's in the damn bill and you know what and you know actually the effects of it and what good it does.
Blake, care to respond?
Yeah. So the thing is, yes, a Medicare for All would outlaw private insurance. That is the case. So I think we need to talk about one thing you said is the human right. I think rather than just declaring them human rights, we actually have to talk about ways to find solutions. So the thing is, if we create a public option, which Andrew Yang has proposed, we will create a somewhat of a Medicare for All system. So we will create competition for the private insurers to lower prices and to make it more competitive. If the people do not like that choice, they can switch to a Medicare system. However, it is not the government's role to tell people to go off of their private insurance within a year. You can't just drag the rug out of people because that's just not the right thing to do. People like their doctors. And if you have such a switch in a short period of time, you may not be able to stay with your doctor. That's very well a chance that could happen. So we need to talk about taking away 70% of Americans' health care. That may not be the right thing to do in such a short period of time. I think if you want the choice to leave and go to a Medicare system, fine. But you should not be up to the government to tell someone to do so. Something I do want to talk about on a different note is holistic care. So we really need to talk about something which is the underlying mental health problems that are with physical conditions. In most cases, they're generally mental health problems that are associated with physical disorders. So something we need to do is send people who have been sent to the hospital to psychiatrists as well. If you are in for your daily checkup, the doctor should say, yes, you should go to a psychiatrist once or twice in a month. And guess what? These can often lead to discovering issues like sexual abuse, like a drug addiction, like domestic violence. So that's something we really need to do. And when we are doing that and talking about those issues and we're able to get those out through psychiatry, life expectancy will increase. And one more thing, I think we have seen that movement along state lines are an all-time low for people. That's something that's wrong because we need people to be creating jobs, becoming entrepreneurs. But it's harder to do that because your job is tied to your insurance. So that's something we really need to address. And the Medicare public option and Medicare for all, for a matter of fact, it's all that. So I think this is something we both can agree upon. And one more thing, a lot of the jobs you're seeing that are being hired are not full-time, but temp jobs. So that creates a problem in the sense that employers don't want to employ the people they're hiring, so they're just putting them in temp gigs.
Okay. Nolan, as an advocate for single payer, do you have a response to the public option here?
Yeah, I want to go back to the choice argument because I don't personally understand why you would want to choose to get your health insurance from a private insurance company that can just price gouge you, give you medical debt beyond that would make you and your family go bankrupt. I just don't get that kind of thinking process. I mean, why would you choose to go into thousands and thousands of dollars in debt because you simply were diagnosed with an illness? I don't understand that. And another thing, you will be able to keep your doctor. This is something that Tulsi has emphasized throughout talking about her healthcare plan. You'll be able to keep your doctor, your hospital. It will cover mental health care. I think that's a good point, good thing that you brought up. It will cover reproductive health care. It will cover dental. It will cover sight, and it will cover everything else. But I again, the choice argument, I just don't understand. I mean, why would you want to choose to pay co-payments, deductibles, and things like that when you can just pay? I think it's 7%. Is what Bernie proposed. Is a 7% payroll on your tax that would be deducted automatically, and actually you'd be paying less because those co-payments and deductibles would be removed completely. So a middle class family would be paying less for health insurance rather than more, and that's also another myth. Yes, under Bernie Sanders' plan, yes, middle class taxes will increase, but you will be spending less on healthcare as a result of all the co-payments and deductibles being completely removed. But yes, I am a very strong proponent of a single payer or single payer plus system.
Okay. Before I get to Alex, do we want to have a quick response on the choice point that you were making before, Blake?
Yeah, so this is America. It's not up for the government to decide whether or not you want to stay on the private insurance or go to a public plan like Medicare system. And it's really not up to the government, and it should be the people who decide that. So if you want to leave your private insurance, let's say it's too expensive for you, you can do that. But it's not for the government to decide that. And this is America, so you will be paying a copayment. It just won't be a check written to the insurance company. It will be out of your paycheck. It will be in the form of a tax.
Okay. Alex, do you want to finalize on the subject of Medicare for all and single payer?
Yes, I would like to. I think, Nolan, I think you're absolutely right. I think, when you're arguing for choice, you're basically arguing, okay, so which agency do you want to price gouge you? Take your pick. Isn't this just fun? No, it's not fun. It's not. So, it's basically like saying, All right, sorry, I'm just getting messages that I'm using up my data because obviously I don't have power, so I'm running on data and I've used up a lot of it. So this might be a recurring issue. I apologize in advance, but I mean, I think that getting back to the point about Medicare for All, I've seen this point made before. If you've heard it before, it bears repeating, so I'm just going to repeat it again. Saying which it's kind of like with the fire department. If you have a fire, you call your fire department, and then it's free at the point on the surface. They put out that fire for you. So if you're sick or you get injured, you go to the hospital, in which you can choose. You can choose which hospital you're going to go to, and you go to the doctor, which you can choose. You can choose which doctor you want, and they help you, and it's free at the point of service. And just like the fire department, it's paid with your tax dollars, just like it is in every other developed country. And Nolan mentioned how Medicare for All would cover dental, vision, and mental health care. And Bernie's damn bill would also cover gender reassignment surgery for trans people, which I think is excellent. It's great to see that they're included in that platform. And overall, I would say that it's a very compelling case to be made for it, and I think it's absolutely the way forward. And that is where the energy of the grassroots is, and that's why I think it's the best way forward.
Okay, thank you for that. So now I want to go into one of our topics that might be the most debatable and controversial of the day, and that's really getting to the economy. I think whenever we're having this audience, one topic that always comes up is the universal basic income, a federal full jobs guarantee, or having both. So during the last debate, Tulsi Gabbard had basically acknowledged that she is more in favor of a universal basic income than a federal full jobs guarantee. Nolan, do you agree with her on that topic?
I don't actually, and I think me saying that I agree with her on that, I'm not being an honest actor. Yes, she is my top candidate, but I have some disagreements with her, and this is one of them. I also support a universal basic income program. I think that why can't you have both? I think it's a false dichotomy that you have to pick between one or the other. I think that universal basic income program can supplement a federal jobs guarantee. Now, Bernie Sanders has said in an interview, he came out against the UBI program, and he said, I think people want to work. And he's right on that. People do want to work. And I think having a job under the federal jobs guarantee program, while also having that UBI extra $1,000 a month, can give people that economic stability that they are really lacking. So they'll be able to purchase groceries. They're able to take that vacation. They can buy some new furniture in their home. So I think that why can't we have both? That's my position. Is I support both.
Okay. Alex, how about you? As mentioned, Bernie Sanders is a big proponent of the federal full jobs guarantee, used to be a supporter of the universal basic income. How do you feel on that? Should we have one or the other or both?
With the way that they're being proposed, currently I support a federal jobs guarantee more, but I would still be open to the idea of UBI, just not the way that Yang is implementing it. And Blake, you will hear about that later on. Hint, hint. But so with the federal jobs guarantee, I mean, there's several problems that need to be solved. I mean, we need to expand our green infrastructure. We need to people who will care for our national parks, and so and we need to repair our infrastructure, which gets a grade of D+. So we obviously need to rebuild these programs that have fallen apart, and the best way to do that is by increasing funding for these programs that Bernie wants to do. I mean, I've already talked about his 16, I think trillion. Is it trillion or billion? I think it's trillion dollar climate plan that would make sure that every fossil fuel worker is currently trained properly to work in the field of green energy. And there are several other ways that this would, and that applies to the federal jobs guarantee as well. And not only that, but it would give more power back to the hands of the people. It will be an economic stabilizer, and it would also allow people who currently work for the private sector, will allow them more bargaining power, who are low-wage workers who work in the private sector. Because I know this is one of Yang's arguments against federal jobs guarantee. The people, they don't automatically want to work for the government. Well, if they work for the private sector, then they can use the threat of leaving that job for one of these jobs under the federal jobs guarantee. That gives them more bargaining power, because it will basically, in a way, for lack of a better term, shame their employers into paying them higher wages and giving them better benefits. And currently, the government spends $150 billion in public support for working families. And so this would definitely this would definitely give them a way of income, and that would definitely help reduce that spending. And so, like I said, I'm open to the idea of UBI, but just not the way Yang which believe me, we will talk about later on.
Okay. Blake, how about you? Are you in favor of a universal basic income, a federal full jobs guarantee, or both?
Well, I think the idea of there being both is somewhat interesting, but I'm not for a federal jobs guarantee. A universal basic income or the freedom dividend, as Andrew Yang has proposed it is the right idea. I think I hope we can all agree that automation will be getting rid of jobs right now and in the future. 88% of factory jobs in the past 10 years have been lost because of automation, according to multiple studies. The Council of Economic Advisors has found that 83% of jobs that pay less than $20 an hour have the chance to be automated. And with AI and other forms of modern technology, we're going to see doctors, lawyers, accountants lose hours and potentially their jobs. That's not all a negative, obviously. Machines can read cancer screenings much better, and they can find cancer in screenings much better than a radiologist can. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. There's a lot of positives to it. However, I want to talk about what we want to bring up. So with a universal basic income, a lot of people are not going. It's going to alleviate the problem with automation, which is already happening. How many 5 million people have lost their jobs in the factory industry? How many truck drivers are going to lose their jobs in that industry because of autonomous vehicles? So we need to find something to do with these people, but just giving them a federal jobs guarantee and saying they'll work for the government is not the solution. So we have to find things that American people want to do, and with a universal basic income, they will be able to do so. They will do stuff like volunteering. They will do stuff like artwork in their community. They will do stuff like signing their kids up for Little League. What about spending more time with their kid? Isn't that very important? They'll do stuff like spending it on car repairs, so it'll go back into the local economy. So that's really important. And one thing I want to ask to the folks that support the federal jobs guarantee, can you be fired from that job? Because what if I want to show up to that job? It's guaranteed. Can I just sit back and eat bonbons all day? I can't get fired if it's guaranteed, right? And one other thing I want to bring up is, what is your plan for mothers? Evelyn Yang quit her job and care for her 2 kids. Her market value, according to GDP, is 0. We obviously know that's not the case because mothers are worth their weight in gold. So how would you find value for mothers who are raising their kids and doing a lot for the economy and for the livelihood of their children?
Okay, thank you. Nolan, do you support, first of all, the freedom dividend, and how do you take those critiques of the federal jobs guarantee?
I do support the freedom dividend. I'm open to I'm open to Yang's plan. I'm also open to other plans as well, and I'm also open to the federal jobs guarantee because I think supplementing that federal jobs guarantee is a serious policy proposal, and I think that it needs to be done. So I don't think shutting out one or the other is productive either. And again, going back to having stay-at-home parents have that kind of economic stability, which is why the UBI will be great for stay-at-home parents. And that's a big reason, big thing that I've seen Andrew Yang argue for, is that's one of his main reasons, that it will make stay-at-home parents really recognized for their hard work and dedication to their kids. But I don't think that argument, like, again, you can be fired from a job, I guess, from the government. Like, you can be fired from any kind of job. And again, the federal jobs guarantee, I'm assuming, will have a paid family leave. I also think that it should have a paid vacational leave as well. But I do think that both of these policies can work hand in hand. And another thing I want to point out is the $15 minimum wage. This is also something that we can get into done on top of a federal jobs guarantee and universal basic income program. Because again, as somebody working in the private sector not making much money, if they're given that $15 an hour or a living wage on top of having a extra $1,000 a month in a UBI program, that will allow them to accomplish their economic dreams, probably allow them to maybe even start their own business. That's another big thing that Yang argues. So I think that all these things can be accomplished and they can all stabilize and supplement one each other.
Okay, thank you for that. Alex, do you have any final thoughts on the critiques that Blake brought up of the federal jobs guarantee as well as the freedom dividend?
Yeah, sure. Now, first of all, I want to go to your first point about Yang supporting this because of the rise of automation. You know what? I can't argue with that on that. And one of the things I can give Yang credit for 100%, he obviously cares deeply about the automation crisis, and he obviously is running for president to not to inflate his own ego, obviously, because no one knew who he was before this. But he's running for president because he wants to raise awareness about potential solutions for it. And you know what? That's admirable. Even if I don't agree with the specifics of his plan, that is admirable, and I absolutely give him credit for that. Now, like I said, I'm open to some sort of basic income, and I'm not under the illusion that it's going to decrease work because, well, there's no evidence that it's going to decrease incentive to work. And in fact, there is some evidence to the contrary on that. So I'm not under that illusion. Not saying you think I am. I just wanted to clarify, but I also, but I do think that the issue of mothers does need to be addressed because they're obviously doing a lot of work at home and they're not getting paid for it. So I think that's absolutely something that needs to be discussed, and I'm definitely glad that, again, it's admirable that Yang is bringing that to the conversation. So like I said, even if I may not agree with those specifics, I think they absolutely are worth talking about because of what we face. And even if I disagree with the policy specifics, I give Yang credit for trying to bring these to the forefront.
Okay. And now I have questions on the subject for Blake here, for Yang. There was a lot of curiosity specifically around UBI for Yang, obviously. The first one you got here from Alex was about the value-added tax, which has been shown that it'll target low-income Americans. Do you believe that's the best way to finance Yang's UBI program?
So when you look at the VAT tax in a vacuum, yes, a VAT would be regressive. But when you're giving people $12,000 a year, it's not regressive. You're going to have to spend a lot of money, more than the freedom dividend, to actually have that to be a regressive tax. So it's not a regressive tax when you're giving people that much money a year. And the way the freedom dividend will be looked at, we're going to put the VAT on a certain percentage on certain products. So luxury products, like diamonds and cruise ships, or yachts, more of stuff like that. Yes, there will be a higher VAT for that because wealthier people are going to be buying those products. So the VAT will be can be increased and decreased based upon how who the market is really set for. So obviously, wealthier people are going to spend more on luxury goods, but no, the tax is not necessarily aggressive with the freedom dividend installed. And I want to talk about the positives of the freedom dividend as well. So when we look at the people Andrew has given this freedom dividend to, I forgot the name of the gentleman, but he gave it to one. I believe he's in Florida. And what is he doing now? He bought a guitar for the first time. He's playing at shows. That speaks about something, what money can give to people, just a little cash, and how much is improving their lives. Another woman going back to school at the age of 60. So it really is improving lives. And the VAT tax itself really is not regressive. There's a lot of positives to the freedom dividend, and it's been endorsed by many economists. Back in the 1970s, UBI itself was endorsed by over 1,000 economists. So it's a wildly popular program.
Okay, and then the follow-up question from Nolan. What do you say to the people who believe that universal basic income is just a band-aid to the problems that we face today?
Well, obviously, there's a whole subset of problems we have in this country. UBI is not going to solve all of them, but they can take a big chunk out of these issues. So what will UBI be able to do? How many Americans today cannot pay for an unexpected $400 bill? I believe it's greater than 70%, or around that area. That's a big problem. How many Americans can't pay their taxes every year because of some issue? How many Americans every year can't pay their bills? How many Americans are dropping out of high school because they have to support their parents with a job? How many Americans are not starting businesses because they just don't have the funds to do so? How many Americans can't care for their elderly loved ones or someone with a disability because they have to work? So sure, UBI itself may not fix every problem, but it addresses a lot of them. And I want to talk about some quotes about UBI and how important it is to society and how much it has been looked upon as a solution to so many things. So Thomas Paine in 1796 said, "Out of a collected fund from landowners, there shall be paid to every person when arrived at the age of 21, the sum of 15 pounds sterling as a compensation in part for the loss of his or her inheritance to every person, rich or poor." Martin Luther King, the day he was killed, up until that day, he was fighting for universal basic income. Richard Nixon supported the universal basic income. Milton Friedman, conservative, very conservative, supported the universal basic income. And back in 2014, it was Bernie Sanders who supported the universal basic income. So I think we can really say that this is not something left, not something right. It's a forward-looking thing, as Andrew Yang would say. So this is something that's really a solution to not every problem, but a lot of them, and it'll help everyday Americans.
Okay, thank you for that, Blake. I think one of the subjects that we all acknowledge, at least a conversation of universal basic income being important for, is for technology and how our society is changing in that regard. One of the things that has been discussed by several of the candidates is the idea of the consolidation of technology. Specifically, we'll bring up companies like Facebook or Amazon, and some of them have proposed being able to break them up. What do you guys think on the subject of being able to break up big companies like Amazon and Facebook? Nolan, what do you think on that subject?
I, along with Tulsi, support the full breakup of these big tech companies, including Google and Facebook. I don't think that Google should own YouTube. Google should be selling YouTube. I think that Facebook should sell WhatsApp and Instagram. Having these companies be monopolies over certain industries and services that people use will actually restrict democracy and free speech in this country, which is proven. Because while certain commentators might not be the best, as you could say, and might be seen as very distasteful, they're still not inciting violence, and they are exercising their First Amendment right, even if we disagree with it or not. So having that handful of people control what we post, control what we read, control what we watch, even control what we buy with Amazon, it needs to be stopped. And that brings me to Amazon, which Amazon should also be selling the Washington Post. Amazon should be selling Audible, because why are we having all these companies suck up all these other minor companies under them? And they're going to be controlling the market, and that's not the free market. That's the market running wild. We just can't have that for this country. It will restrict democracy.
Okay, thank you for that. How about you, Alex? How do you feel about the consolidation of big tech companies? Should they be broken up?
Yes, absolutely. And John, on a private message on Twitter, I did share with you some information about this kind of stuff. I shared with you what I wanted candidates to prioritize the issue of technology. And I just want to say, first of all, thank you for agreeing to put that as part of your congressional platform. And one thing I mentioned in there was democratizing social media. That was an idea that someone who had read my platform, like of what I wanted to go through, had wanted to address. And it's something that Bernie Sanders also addressed. He wants workers to, in a way, co-own these media companies. Not media companies, tech companies, because I know Nolan brought up how Amazon owns the Washington Post. Well, that obviously could create a bias in the Washington Post, where it could write articles that just completely lick Amazon's boots, because and that way you can't really trust what they're saying because they're beholden to Amazon. And not just that, but you see how my family just got a Ring doorbell. I don't trust that thing for a second. I mean, because it can over 500 cities, and not including mine. Like it can allow law enforcement warrantless access to your surveillance photos and videos, and that is not okay. And so I mean, like, this is what happens when these tech companies become really powerful, and so I think that is one of the big reasons why I support breaking up these companies, because when you form a monopoly, well, then they're just completely in control, and there's just no room for, and then the users and the workers for the companies just completely get shut out. And so that's why I completely support Bernie's proposal, not only to break up these tech companies, but give workers a more inclusive role in what they say. And I think that's absolutely something that we should be talking about, and I'm glad we are.
Okay. How about you, Blake? Do you believe that we should be breaking up big tech companies?
So yeah, I think when we're talking about big tech companies and breaking them up, we should really be talking we should be looking at the person who's worked in this kind of industry, and that is Andrew Yang. Sorry to Bernie Sanders and Tulsi Gabbard, but neither of them have. So Andrew actually just yesterday released a blog on his website where he talked about whether or not he supports breaking up big tech. That's something he talked about, and you can see in the debate. I'm sure you all know the line. Nobody Bing stuff anymore. And that's true. Nobody uses Bing anymore. And why is that? Because it's just not as good as Google. And guess what? Competition and breaking up Google is not going to create a bunch of competition between these companies. It is just going to create another popular web-based user on web-based search. It's not going to be competition and something of that sort. It's just uncharacteristically against the way humans use the internet. So I don't think that's really how it's going to work. But here's the thing that we need to also talk about when we're talking about breaking up big tech. Big tech is in the regards to privacy. Yes, big tech is using our privacy, or taking our personal information. They're almost intruding on our privacy. Yes, that should be looked upon, and we really need to create solutions to that. And attacks upon some of these companies is something we should look at, as well as attacks upon these ads they're putting out. Facebook is putting out a lot of ads with false information. So to discourage that, we really should put some of that tax upon those companies, because right now they're just lying Facebook to get money, and we need to really incentivize that.
Okay. And now I'd be curious, all three of you are kind of somewhat in favor of certain solutions here. I wouldn't say Blake is as for it. But what do you guys think is the real role here in breaking it up? Is it for all big tech companies? Is it for Google and Facebook? Do you think it's one or the other? What do you think the process of evaluating if something should be broken up should be like? Nolan, what do you think about that?
Yeah, so I think it can be many different companies. Google and Facebook are the biggest in the conversation, and I agree those need to be broken up as well. But we also need to look at companies like Apple, who run the App Store. They run iTunes. They run Apple Music. They run all these different minor platforms under their big umbrella of a company. Those also need to be broken up. I think this doesn't get talked about enough. Um, uh, Amazon, again, like I said, Audible is another company that they own. They're controlling what you read. They can be censoring books, which is literally the plot of Fahrenheit 451. So I think a lot of these kinds of things that we read in these dystopian novels are low-key becoming realities. Because when we see these giant tech companies control what we read, listen to, watch, we're not free. We essentially are not free. So I think we need to go about it by looking at Facebook, Google, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, all these different companies, and we need to look closely at this issue.
Okay. Now, Blake, just to be fair, I think you were a lot more negative on the subject, specifically on what Yang mentioned about Google. Do you believe there are any circumstances in which we should be looking to break these up, or do you think it's more case by case, or is it just no across the board?
Well, I think we have regulations in place to look at monopolies and break them up. I'm not sure that the current stuff we have in place, these groups from the 1960s, are meant to really deal with 21st century technology. So something we really need to do is bring back the Department of Technology. We got rid of that in the 90s, I believe. That should be brought back to really look at big tech and make a decision about it. So I think that regulation of big tech, yes, that's something we should look at. Yes, that's something we need to do, but I don't think breaking up big companies like Facebook, like Google, is really going to solve this type of issue, because it just hasn't worked in the past when we've seen competition in these areas. Bing and DuckDuckGo are not necessarily too popular right now. Google is. So regulating data and privacy, yes, that's something we should do. But breaking up companies, I'm not so sure about that. And one thing Andrew has talked about, and I think it's really important to bring up, is monitoring screen time and educating parents and students about the dangers of using a phone for so long. I think that's something that's just as important, if not more, as the regulation of big tech, because people can really develop addictions to phones, and that's something we need to look at as well, and big tech plays a big role in that.
Okay, well then I'll apologize for the mischaracterization before on what you had said. Alex, do you have any final thoughts on the idea of being able to break up big tech?
Yeah, so, I mean, first of all, Blake, I just want to say, I give your candidate credit on one issue related to this, treating your data as your personal property. As far as I'm concerned, I think he's the only candidate who has come out in favor of that, and you know what? Full credit to him on that. Absolutely, I absolutely agree with him 100% on that. And you know, Rand, I'll give it to you. I don't think that breaking up these companies is the end-all be-all, but I would say that it's definitely an important step we need to take. I mean, obviously, several other reforms need to be placed. I mean, I don't think, like I said, again, they should treat your data as your personal property. They shouldn't sell your information. They shouldn't collect vulnerable information from you, as several companies do, such as your race, your religion, your immigration status, etc. This is something that unfortunately a lot of tech companies do. So I don't think breaking them up, again, it's not the end all be all, but it's a very, very important step we need to take because of the stranglehold that these big tech companies like Amazon, Google have had on our economy. That's definitely something, and very important action that we need to take to weather that stranglehold, I would say.
Okay, thank you. So with that being said, I think we've discussed a lot of the topics that are focused on domestic policy here in America. One of the biggest roles that any candidate here, if nominated and elected, will have to serve is being our commander-in-chief. I wanted to find out from you all why you believe your candidate has the unique approach that makes them best suited to be commander-in-chief. And I think there is one candidate who has made this argument the most, being Tulsi Gabbard. So Nolan, I'll let you start off on this question.
Yeah, so unapologetically and unequivocally, Tulsi Gabbard is the most qualified candidate out of the three and out of the, I think, probably 18, 20 candidates now who is qualified to serve as commander in chief. She is and still is currently serving in the Hawaii Army National Guard for now 16 years. She still serves as a major. She deployed twice to Iraq and she served in a medical unit. And this is the kind of experience that she brings as a soldier. She knows the costs of war. She knows how to deal with it. She knows that we shouldn't be cuddling to Saudi Arabia. She knows that we need to cut ties with them. She knows that we need to meet with our adversaries like Assad. I know a lot of people discourage that meeting. I think she should have taken the meeting because these are the typical conversations that we are going to need to take. And it's not like Obama was going to step up and do it as he was bombing innocent civilians in Syria at the time under the guise of fighting ISIS. So that is also something that she brings is being able to meet with our leaders. Yes, she's going to meet with Kim Jong-un. Yes, she's going to meet with Erdogan. Yes, she's going to meet with the newly not elected leader of Bolivia and discuss what's going on there, because what's going on there is a coup backed by the CIA and the United States government, and it's to be called out as such. And I hope that that she puts out a statement because I've been kind of disappointed in that. She also is for not giving so much money away to Israel, which I credit Bernie Sanders for stepping up on this issue by saying, you know what, we're going to recognize the kind of human rights violations that Israel is doing against Palestinians. Unfortunately, Andrew Yang has not been great on this issue. He has, in fact, been more supportive of Israel over Palestinian lives. And I don't think we should be favoring one set of citizens over the other. I'm just saying we need to look at them as equal people, because right now they're not seen as equal. And in fact, United States politicians are favoring Israeli lives and the Israeli government, actually, instead of Israeli lives, the Israeli government and Netanyahu over Palestinian lives. And I think it's disgraceful what's going on with AIPAC and other groups favoring, our politicians favoring the Israeli government over the Palestinian lives. So.
Okay, thank you, Nolan. I'm now curious, Alex, why do you think Bernie Sanders is the most suited to be commander-in-chief?
All right. Well, first, let me say that Nolan, I do completely agree that Tulsi Gabbard would be great on foreign policy. I think her and Bernie are head and shoulders above the rest of the field with regard to the subject. I mean, with Bernie, he was the only senator to oppose Trump's bloated military budget, and this is something that he brings up on the campaign trail a lot, and I'm glad he does because it distinguishes between him and Elizabeth Warren, who's cutting into his voting demographic, and I think that's a perfect way to differentiate himself from her. And I also mentioned this earlier, but he got the War Powers Resolution to end U.S. participation in the war in Yemen passed, and I think it was the first instance of Congress using the War Powers Resolution for that purpose, and he was able to lead the charge in that. And he was able to see through the lies that the Bush-Cheney administration gave about Iraq. He was able to vote against it. And back in the 1990s, he gave a very impassioned speech talking about how we have no real enemies to be afraid of, and how a lot of it was just made up to scapegoat certain people and to whip Americans into a frenzy. It was back in the 90s. He's also opposed Trump's illegal sanctions on Iran, which violate international law. And there are some areas in Bernie's foreign policy that I will say could be better. He's not fully against the drone program, and I am disappointed in that. I'm disappointed that during 2015, maybe he's come out and renounced this. I hope he has, but if he has, I don't think he has. I'd love to be proven wrong, though. He said he would still use drones as president, and I'm just like, dude, why? No, come on. Do you have to? Drones? No, just no. He also recently gave an answer on Israel. Now, I do think he is the strongest on the issue of Israel, but the bar for that, because he's basically both siding the issue when it's really Israel who's doing the illegal occupation of Palestine, and he's basically now, I think his proposal on conditioning aid to Israel. I like that, and you know what? I think it's the best in the field. But again, it's not great. But then again, neither is almost every politician on this issue in Washington is not good. And you know, I think Nolan, this would be a good time to Tulsi Gabbard's latest vote over the summer. I'm sorry, did I pause for a minute?
No, you're good.
All right.
You're good.
Tulsi over the summer, she infamously was one of the more traditionally more progressive Democrats who voted for an anti-BDS resolution, and I know the left came after her for that. And honestly, I don't blame them because it's really the only peaceful movement against Israel's legal occupation of Palestine. And so, granted, I'm not sure Bernie would have voted against that resolution either, but I mean, that doesn't give Tulsi a pass. And so I am disappointed in her in that. But I think I've laid out, despite these shortcomings in Bernie's foreign policy, I think he has overall very progressive foreign policy. He also agrees we need to meet with our allies. He wants diplomacy. And you know what? That is definitely the way to go with how much money we've wasted and how much lives we've wasted on war.
Okay. Now, Blake, why do you believe Andrew Yang is the best as commander-in-chief?
Well, I think we can say this as a matter of fact. Andrew Yang does not have much experience in foreign policy. I know a lot of people in the Yang Gang, as they call it, would say that they want Tulsi Gabbard as a vice presidential nominee, maybe more as a secretary of state. I'm not sure where she'd necessarily go in the cabinet, but I think she would play some role in that Yang administration. So I think he's going to really surround himself with advisors who will make a lot of decisions and help him make the right decision. Andrew Yang, I'm not going to say he's the expert on foreign policy by any stretch of the imagination. He's not running a foreign policy center campaign, but something he has pledged to do is end the forever wars, and I think that's something we all have to agree is the right thing. We've been in a lot of these conflicts for many, many years. There's really no end in sight. Now, I am going to take this in a direction a bit away from the Yang campaign into my personal beliefs. I'm not sure if any of you are Jewish, but I'm the only. I'm Jewish. I speak Hebrew, so I just want to talk about the Israel thing a little bit. So when it comes to the BDS movement, which you almost vouched for, I think it's appropriate what Tulsi Gabbard did by voting against and condemning it. It was a resolution. The BDS movement does call for the destruction of Israel as a Jewish state. I find that a bit concerning when you look at the foundation of the movement by Omar Barghouti, who says Israel has no place in the Middle East. The movement also calls for the right of return for every UNRWA-recognized refugee, so not every 1948 refugee, but every Palestinian today, including ones who live in the West. So it would be a bit concerning to see the destruction of Israel as a Jewish state in multiple regards. There's also affiliations with Hamas between BDS and a new report put out by the government of Israel, along with some work with some NGOs. So that's really concerning. So I don't think Tulsi Gabbard was wrong to vote against BDS, and Senator Sanders is against BDS. The vast majority of Americans are against BDS, so I don't think BDS is really a constructive movement. And also at the same time, I think that while we see right now as we're talking, at least earlier this today, we're seeing rockets fired down upon Israel from Islamic Jihad. I think that's a bit concerning. We have to realize that, yes, Israel's not perfect. Is Prime Minister Netanyahu the best person for Israel at this time? Is there corruption looming over him? Yes. So I'm not here to not vouch for Netanyahu, but I think Israel does have a right to exist as a Jewish state, which the BDS movement doesn't necessarily give Israel the right to exist.
Okay. Nolan, do you care to respond to Alex as well as Blake?
Yeah, so I think there was a lot of both confusion and a lot of emotion around her anti-BDS vote when it was released. I remember the left went after her, and I didn't really go after her immediately. I wanted for the facts to come out, and I wanted to hear from her herself, and she put out a video. And she voted for the bill in the same way that Blake was kind of referring to it, is that it was not constructive in resolving the conflict that we're seeing going on between the Palestinian people and the Israeli government. But the bill in no way inflicts on those people who participate in BDS. It still gives them the right to do so. And I think that needs to be emphasized a little bit more. So she did not vote against free speech in any way. She voted with Ro Khanna and Ayanna Pressley, two very progressive Democrats as well. But again, I do believe Israel's right to exist. Tulsi does as well. I'm pretty sure Tulsi supports a two-state solution. I support a two-state solution. But I think that we need to bring to light the Israeli government's slaughter of innocent Palestinians. And that's why I think it's a good job that Bernie is talking about restricting aid to Israel because of this. But I, in no way, shape, or form support the notion that Israel shouldn't exist. I think that is an anti Semitic viewpoint. And I personally do condemn that position.
Okay. How do you feel, Alex, on the subject of BDS as well as the idea of being commander-in-chief for Bernie Sanders?
All right, so I do agree that Israel has committed several human rights violations in Palestine, and they need to be put in check. The financial aid that they get needs to be put in check. And I'm aware that the bill did not do anything. Like the resolution, it's not a bill; it's a resolution. The one that she and the reason I make that distinction is because, well, it didn't actually do anything. Like it didn't outlaw BDS protesters, and you know what? Good. I am disappointed that it passed so overwhelmingly, but I mean, in the long term, it doesn't really restrict free speech. But I mean, I'm gonna be brutally honest. I think this is an area where I am somewhat underinformed. I mean, I do know, I do know good. I'd like to say that I know a bit about it, but I mean, I can't claim to have encyclopedic knowledge on the subject, so I'll just be upfront about that. And but I think I've laid out overall how Senator Sanders would pursue peace. He would pursue diplomacy before any other option, and I think before using war as a last resort. And I think that is definitely the kind of person we need, and that is one of the many reasons why I support him.
Okay, thank you for that, Alex. Do you have any final thoughts, Blake, on why you think Andrew Yang is the best to be commander-in-chief? I know you talked before about surrounding himself, but what do you think about Andrew Yang would make him a servable diplomat, at least on a foreign level?
Well, let's say this: he worked for President Obama, or not necessarily worked for him, but he was recognized by President Obama, and he did some work with the White House to be a leader for change. So I think he has a bit of a role in the diplomat area. He knows a lot of people in and around the tech community, which is really valuable. He's going to be able to represent the United States firsthand as someone who knows the 21st century holds, the 21st century challenges holds, while also being able to speak really with leaders he knows as well. And I think something really interesting is look at his support from Elon Musk. Obviously, that's not necessarily a good diplomat, but he's South African. He's worked with a lot of different countries, the spread of technology, space technology as well. So what about the United States' role in space technology, as well as just being a diplomat for modern technology around the world that Elon Musk could play with the White House potentially as a Yang supporter? And also just Andrew Yang knows technology, and I really think that's something important. Now, I know both of you, your candidates have said they would cut aid to Israel, at least use it as a bargaining tool, not to make this so much of an Israel debate. But Andrew Yang earlier in February said he would not cut aid to Israel. And I'm going to say this, I do not believe that aid should be a bargaining tool to Israel at this moment. Sure, if Prime Minister Netanyahu goes ahead and works to annex the West Bank, yes, maybe we should look at that. However, at this moment, we are seeing rockets fired from Islamic Jihad at Israelis. If the aid we give to Israel is cut, Israel will be in a lot of trouble. And here's why. The United States places troops in a lot of countries like Germany, like South Korea, like Japan. We have hundreds of thousands of troops there. So that acts as a buffer zone and a reason not to attack. We give aid to Israel instead because Israel's military would rather fight their own wars. So I think if we were really using the bargaining chip, I think we put innocent people's lives at risk. So I think that's somewhat of an issue. And I think that if we're going to be using people's lives as a bargaining chip, I'm not necessarily sure that's the best position. And I think Andrew Yang is right in saying he would not cut aid to Israel.
Okay, and now sticking on foreign policy for a moment, we have now the questions for Nolan and Tulsi Gabbard. I'll start with the foreign policy related question. Donald Trump has often talked about being America first and has hurt our country's relationships with several foreign allies, including NATO members and the Kurds. How would Tulsi compare to Trump in handling those relationships?
Through actual diplomacy. What Trump's foreign policy is we need to call it what it is, which is isolationism. And there's this kind of stereotype that Tulsi is somehow some right-wing fascist isolationist. Like, oh my God. No, she's not that at all. She's a diplomat. And that's what we need in the White House, and that will actually put America first on the national stage. While we're not going to be the world's police, which is what we've been doing for decades now. And we've been doing it in the Middle East since the early 2000s after 9/11, when Bush sent our troops into Iraq based on a war that was based on lies. So she would pursue diplomatic means. She would talk with these countries, even if there are adversaries like Assad, like Kim Jong Un. But she would work out these differences and see something that can better the American people instead of put us at risk. I do think that Trump's sloppy withdrawal of the troops did hurt the Kurds, and Tulsi would pull our troops from Syria, but not in that way. At least I believe so. But yeah, she would be a diplomat and not an isolationist, which I think is a clear indicator of the difference between her foreign policy and Trump's foreign policy, and not being the world's police.
Okay, thank you for that. And now the second question that you were given is, how do you feel about Tulsi Gabbard in the past supporting anti-LGBTQ views?
I think it's something that a lot of people can empathize with, because she was in her early teens when she worked on her father's PAC that proposed anti-LGBTQ plus legislation in the Hawaii State Legislature, and she has come out since and said, you know what, I was wrong. I did hold homophobic views. She put out a video and a formal apology. And I think this is honestly a lazy slur and smear that people try and throw at her, mainly from the mainstream media and the political elite, to try and discredit her, when in fact she has been a fighter for LGBTQ plus issues. She has a 100% score from the Human Rights Campaign. But a lot of people really can empathize with her on this. She supported gay rights before Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama supported gay rights. So I do think that it's not really a credible critique of her, considering that she has evolved since, and it was in her teenage years as well.
Okay, thank you for that.
John, because I asked the question, because that was my question, I do want to address them in a Nolan. I'm not trying to smear her for it. Me personally, this is something that me and my friends have argued about endlessly, and you know what? It was stupid of me to do that. Look, a lot of my friends are LGBTQ, so they, I mean, I'm not, but a lot of my friends are, so I think their opinion on this is worth more than mine, I would say, because they my friend is gay and he grew up in a socially conservative household, so he doesn't buy that as an excuse. And like they say that her voting record is the bare minimum, and they are also, so basically their philosophy is she's made her bed, now she's got to sleep in it, and that is basically their philosophy, and there's no change in their mind. But I will say this. What I've learned is it's not my place to forgive on my own. But I think I reserve the right, since I wasn't hurt by her actions, I reserve the right to I shouldn't be the one to decide whether or not she's forgiven, but I think I reserve the right to hear opinions from the LGBTQ community and make the judgment myself. And from what I've heard, I think that the side of she should be forgiven is more compelling. Call me biased all you want, but I think it is more compelling. Because you mentioned how she supported gay rights before Hillary and before Obama did, and you know what? There is a lot of merit to that statement. So you know what? I'm not trying to smear her because I like her and I have legitimate criticisms of her, but I will come after her in ways that are justified. But I mean, I can see where LGBTQ people have a problem with her on this, but I mean, and I will say it's a much more legitimate criticism than accusing her of being a Russian asset or a Putin puppet. I will say, like, I think we can all agree on that at least. But I mean, I'm not trying to smear you, man. I just hope we're clear on that.
Okay, Nolan, care to respond?
Yeah, I totally understand that. I have also a lot of LGBTQ plus friends. I am not part of the LGBTQ plus community, so I do agree with you that we need to hear their point of view on this. I think that that's very important. I agree with you on that. And I do think that some people might be uncomfortable and see her record in regards to those issues. And while I get it, I necessarily might not agree with it, because I think her record speaks for itself in the House of Representatives. And I also think that Barack Obama should be forgiven. I mean, he literally fought to legalize gay marriage nationally. So I think people forgive him for that. And I think the same standard should be held up to Tulsi, because they both argued vehemently against LGBTQ plus rights. And even Joe Biden in the 2008 vice presidential debate with Sarah Palin. There was that moment, if you remember, where they both agreed, Palin and Biden, on being against LGBTQ plus rights. So it's not an equal standard that's held up to Tulsi as it is to the more establishment-friendly candidates. And I also understand that you're not trying to smear her, but I think the people, because I know that you're not trying to use that as a way to discredit her, but many people in the mainstream media, the political elite, Neera Tanden, those kinds of people are, and I just think it's a lazy slur and a lazy critique of her.
Okay. And so now I want to get into our final question before we get into our closing statements. And this is on the subject of immigration. So the main body that has been doing enforcement of immigration in our country now has been ICE, for the people that are already here as undocumented immigrants. Do you believe that ICE should continue to exist? And if so, what role do you believe that they should play? I'll start with Blake on this one. Blake, do you think ICE should exist? And if so, what's their role to play?
So Andrew Yang has talked about ICE and the problematic roles that they do have with immigration at this moment. Some of the stuff they're doing right now, it's not necessarily new. It was being done under Obama with putting kids in cages, separating them. Other policies under Trump have been a lot more far to the right than under Obama. But you are seeing the traumatic experience that these children are suffering. These people being separated from their kids, disease is spreading, sleeping in cold rooms with blankets. Yes, these are traumatic experiences. Does ICE do some things that are good, like fighting counterfeit money? Yes. Do they do things like fighting terrorism? Yes. But do I think this organization needs to necessarily continue? I'm not sure. I know Andrew Yang has said he wants to keep it in place because of the role they play. Personally, I think it can play in place, but I don't think it's vital. And I know people have made the claim that people like AOC have said, oh, these are concentration camps or the Gestapo. And I'm not sure those claims are entirely out of the ballpark. I'm Jewish, and I think when you see the diseases spreading through these places, people being separated, people crying, these are maybe not concentration camps, people aren't being gassed, but these are disgusting conditions. And the American people, this is a stain on America.
Okay. Alex, how do you feel about this? Should ICE continue to exist? And if so, what role do you think that they should play?
Okay, first of all, I apologize for me moving around a lot. My phone's about to die, so I need to charge it. And I'm charging it with the limited amount of power I have from the generator. So I got to make do with what I got. So I'm sorry about this. First of all,
thank you for trooping through.
All right. This is actually an issue where I disagree with Bernie Sanders. Correct me if I'm wrong. He is not for the abolition of ICE. I am. I think, it's a shockingly easy argument to make, honestly. It sounds so extreme on the surface, but when you look into it, you realize, wow, that was a much easier argument to make than I thought, because we lasted almost our entire country's life without it, because we only started it after the 9/11 attacks. We only started in 2003 with the Department of Homeland Security. And so, the thing with 2/3 of Americans live within 100 miles of the southern border. And so that is under jurisdiction of both ICE and Border Patrol. And we already had Border Patrol for the longest. That just adds insult to injury with how unnecessary ICE really is. And not to mention how racially motivated it is, and how it scapegoats immigrants, and how it does these raids on immigrant communities. And it just creates we already have such a bloated law enforcement that we really don't need to add to it. And so we already have these law enforcement. If they're violent criminals who just happen to be undocumented immigrants, well, then we have plenty of agencies that existed well before ICE and serve a much, honestly, better purpose than ICE. I mean, I can criticize these agencies if I want to, but I mean, I can't deny that they serve a much better and more justifiable purpose than ICE. We already have them that can take care of this kind of stuff. So, yeah, honestly, it's just a scandal that we have ICE in the first place, and they have to be abolished.
Okay, and I'll give you some happy news. Bernie Sanders has recently proposed the breaking up of ICE and abolishing it.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yes, well, so I will acknowledge that position. Nolan,
well, thank you.
You're very welcome. Nolan, how do you feel on the subject of ICE? Should it exist still, and if so, what role should it play?
I agree with Bernie Sanders. I think that ICE should be broken up, and I think it can be proposed. We can involve the National Mass Care Strategy, and we can also work with the Red Cross to kind of assist in the humanitarian crisis of the border crisis. that is something that needs to be looked at, because this isn't just like people coming into the country. This is a crisis down in south of the border. I mean, these countries are in turmoil because of uh, drug and gang violence, things of that nature, and that needs to be addressed from a humanitarian perspective instead of just locking up people who are trying to flee violence. Um, I also think that I should focus a little bit more on screening cargo, identifying counterfeit goods, and preventing smuggling and drug trafficking, and sex trafficking for that matter, coming up from the border. But I think what we need to focus on is instead end this inhumane policy of separating children from their parents, as well as improving these facilities, because they are prisons. We shouldn't be treating these immigrants that are seeking asylum like prisons. We should be treating them as, hey, we welcome you to our country. Let's help you. I know you're escaping a difficult time. Let's assist you. We want to help you. We want to make you an American. But right now ICE is more ICE has this kind of image as being tough, like a tough on crime approach. And I think that needs to be removed. I think they need to be more assisting rather than enforcing. If that kind of makes sense.
Okay, so you do see that there is some role for them still, but that there's massive reform that needs to happen for the organization.
Yep.
Is that correct? Okay.
Yeah.
So then I'd be curious, Blake. Alex had said, as well as Bernie Sanders, that we should be breaking up the organization. I think we can all acknowledge that there's issues with the organization, but why do you think it should be preserved and adapted rather than abolished?
Well, I think when you break up an entire organization, it takes some time to do so. I'm not inherently against breaking up ICE. Obviously, DHS exists, so that's something that can do much of what ICE does. But I think they do have a purpose right now with a lot of things, not just immigration, but with counterfeit money. That's a really big one. Sex trafficking on the border. Those are just two big things, and I think we shouldn't take those issues lightly. I think reforms are definitely needed, big reforms. But I think just breaking up ICE is a bit. I like the spirit of it. I mean, you want to help people, but I think when you just want to break it up, it's a bit of a short-sighted look at something rather than just saying, well, maybe we can just put some big reforms in place.
Okay. So Alex, unlike Blake, you have been, as well as Bernie Sanders, a proponent of a full abolition of ICE as an organization, rather than a reform or cutting out specific parts of it. Why do you support the full abolition of ICE?
Well, like I said, it was never necessary in the first place because we already have an agency that deals with immigration. We already have plenty law enforcement officials at law enforcement agencies, and I think that and with what ICE has become and what you could argue what its purpose was from the beginning, because I mean, you can hardly trust a word the Bush and Cheney administrations say. You could easily make the case, and you can make the compelling case that it was only put there in the beginning to scapegoat immigrants and to scapegoat minorities, and the fact that that was its likely purpose, and the fact that again it was never necessary in the first place. I mean, that just and the fact that if you get rid of it, well, you still have other agencies that will basically do its work. It's I think it's I that's why I'm easily sold on the idea of abolishing it.
Okay. And now, Nolan, you are in the camp relatively of reforming the organization. It's massive reforms that are needed. But why do you think ICE itself should still be kept in place?
Because I think that we need some sort of organization that specializes in immigration control. Obviously, we don't want open borders. I don't think open borders exist, but we don't want that. I don't think any of us want that. So without ICE, I don't think there would be much organization on our border, on our southern border. And I don't think it's the right way to go to abolish it, and I don't think it's the right way to go to keep it as it is. Because right now the practices are inhumane, but if it gets abolished, then the government will have some sort of a panic attack, because what's going to control the influx of those seeking asylum at our border? And I think that ICE has a terrible image right now. I don't agree with their tactics at all. But I think that those massive reforms are needed. Instead of providing imprisonment, they need to provide uplifting. These immigrants who are coming and seeking asylum and are seeking a better life in America, we need to welcome them instead of just shut them in these cages.
Okay, thank you for that. And so now, as we approach our end, I want to give each of you one more chance to tell the Rosebuds out there why you think your candidate is the best for the job in 2020 and why we need to work for them the hardest. So first, I want to give Blake, why do you think Andrew Yang is the best candidate for the job in 2020?
Yes, it's been great to be on here. Really fun time with all you guys. So Andrew Yang, we need to talk about what is the most important issues for Americans, and that is how Donald Trump is the president. They want to beat Donald Trump, and how do we beat Donald Trump? We have to address the issues that got Trump elected, and just as important is also making fundamental changes in our country. And Andrew Yang is one of the few candidates who actually does both. I know Bernie and Tulsi Gabbard are actually two of the better ones in that regard as well, but I think Andrew Yang is number one because he's the only candidate running on fixing the issues that got Donald Trump elected. We've automated away 5 million manufacturing jobs. And what has happened to those people? They have gone to mental health issues. They have had drug overdoses. Many of them, 50% of them, as a matter of fact, are not going back to work and are now eligible for disability. So we are seeing the problems, and how do we solve that is through a freedom dividend of $1,000 a month. If we can give the economic resources to the people to solve their own problems, that is how we will see people's lives improve, the economy improve, and our country improve. This is a deeply American idea, as I stated before. But Andrew Yang has now gone beyond just the freedom dividend. He is running on a lot of issues we've talked about, and I think Andrew Yang has really laid out a solution to all of them. He is not a politician. He is a problem solver. A career with Venture for America, which he founded, the tens of thousands of jobs being created in cities, which were generally seen as economic dumps at the time. And Andrew Yang really did a good job of bringing jobs back, and now the vital economies in a lot of cities, including Detroit, where the second Democratic debate was held, Andrew Yang was very vital in bringing that economy back up, and now it's doing very well. So if we want to if we want to defeat Donald Trump while also making America a much happier, healthier, and better place to live, we should vote for the person who has the math and has done it, and that is Andrew Yang. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Alex, why do you believe Bernie Sanders is the best candidate in 2020 to be the Democratic nominee?
All right, well, we got to wrap this up because my dad is pissed because I have been using a lot of data lately. So we're gonna have to go through this. And by the way, I think this is the same text being sent over and over again, Dad. All right. Well, I could be in hot water, so we're gonna have. So this is the things I do. So this is how dedicated I am to Bernie. So end of closing count. Just kidding. Now, first of all, John, I just want to say thank you for allowing us this opportunity. This has been really fun. Nolan, Blake, thank you guys for coming on, and it's admirable just how much you're willing to address why you support these candidates and why you think they're the best fit. And you know what? I can definitely see the positives in them both. I mean, I think Tulsi on foreign policy, she is fantastic, and I am glad that she's bringing the issue of ending American imperialism to the front of the conversation. That I actually give her credit for. And Blake, with Yang, I mentioned I had criticisms with his UBI proposal, but I am definitely glad that he is bringing awareness to the automation crisis to front and center. And I do think that on several of his other issues, such as treating data as your personal right and also democracy dollars, as well as, again, lowering the voting age to 16, decriminalizing all other drugs. These are some areas where he really does shine. I will give him credit on that. But by and large, I think Bernie Sanders is the one who has a platform. He has the best strategy. He has the best record. He's been fighting for the people his whole career. He's never sold out. He's influenced mainstream public opinion in such a positive way. He's encouraged several people to get out there and become more politically active, to hold their people representatives accountable. And he's never sold out, and he never will. And we need someone like him, someone that's honest, as populist, and he can relate. He can relate to the people. Like, you know, he is definitely someone who can peel away those two-time Obama voters who switched to Trump, who are the ones we desperately need to win this election, because he is speaking their language. He's the real populist, not Donald Trump. He's the one who's been fighting against these trade deals. He's the one who's been fighting against their military-industrial complex. He's the one who's been fighting against the swamp, and he is the one I trust to be our next president.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Alex, for being here and suffering through all the technical challenges you're having with your blackout. With that being said, Nolan, I want to give you the case and the floor to make a final statement. Why do you think Tulsi Gabbard is the most equipped to be the Democratic nominee in 2020?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for hosting it again. I think this is a great platform to be able to have these kinds of discussions, and I'm really grateful for it because you don't see this often. And I want to thank Blake for you definitely know your stuff. That's definitely what I've learned about you. You come with facts, and you don't take any kinds of falsities. And then, Alex, you are definitely passionate about and energetic about your support for Bernie, and I think that's really admirable. But I think Tulsi is the best person to serve as president um, because she brings the values of service of self as a soldier to the White House, and that's what we need. We need a president who's going to put the people above profit. And unlike Donald Trump is selling out to the gun lobby, the Israeli lobby, and I think we need a president who really stands up for the people and what they believe in. She will give Americans health care. She will end our forever wars. She will solve climate change, and I think she brings a unique perspective as a soldier, as a current major in the Wyoming National Guard, of fixing what America has done to the Middle East. And I think that's generally the root cause of the problem because we can't pay for all of these proposals without addressing the bloated military budget and the billions of dollars that we're spending currently in Afghanistan. And that is ultimately why I think Tulsi is the best candidate to serve as our next commander-in-chief.
Well, thank you for that. And thank you again, Nolan, for being one of the driving forces for why we ended up being able to have this second form of debate. We were really working through that on DMs and Twitter to get that done. So thank you again for being a participant.
No problem.
And again, thank all three of you. It's been as we could see, you'll notice for a couple cuts here and there in the video, we faced some challenges along the way, but I'm really glad that we were all able to have this conversation together. Before we wrap up, I want to give a couple quick plugs of what we have going on here. You'll see this video likely either Tuesday morning or Wednesday morning, whenever you decide to go check it out, right before the Democratic debate that's going to be happening on the 20th. It's going to be happening in Atlanta. Make sure you all go and check that out that night. I want to make sure everyone sees what's happening up on stage. And the last thing is that, as some of you may know on the channel, I'm running for Congress. One of the things I'm doing is I've now opened up a new Slack channel for people who want to assist with the campaign. If you want to be involved in that, the link will be down below in the description section. With that being said, Rosebuds, thank you for tuning in again. And until next time, stay rosy.